never imagined that at 60 years old, I'd find myself sitting in my car, staring at the dark windows of my son's house, realizing I had nowhere to go. Just 12 hours ago, I had a husband, a home, a future I thought was certain. Now, I had a hastily packed suitcase in my trunk, and the crushing truth, everything I had built, everything I had sacrificed, had been ripped away from me in a single day. The betrayal came first from Rob, my husband of 35 years, who sat across from me at breakfast, spreading peanut butter onto toast like it was any ordinary morning. But his words weren't ordinary. "We need to talk, Maggie. Tonight." Then, just hours later, it came from James, my son, the boy I had raised with love, sweat, and sacrifice, who now stood in his doorway, blocking me from stepping inside. "Mom, what are you doing here?" The house that once felt like mine, the family I thought I was part of, gone. And in their place, smiling warmly at me like a queen surveying her kingdom, was Vanessa's mother. "Oh, we've been here almost a week, helping the kids prepare for the arrival." The arrival? James shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. Vanessa's pregnant, the new family was moving in, and I was being pushed out. But what none of them realized, not my husband, not my son, not his perfect wife and her perfect family, was that I wasn't done yet. I was about to show them what real survival looked like. The morning started the way all normal days start, the kind you don't realize will be the last normal day you'll ever have. I was standing in the kitchen of our riverside house, sunlight pouring through the windows, throwing long golden stripes across the tile floor. Outside, the maple trees were on fire with color, reds and oranges so vivid they looked unreal. I stirred my coffee absently, listening to the familiar clink of Rob buttering his toast. We'd lived in that rhythm for 35 years, but today, there was a wrongness under it all. An off-key note I couldn't ignore. Rob wasn't reading the paper like usual. He wasn't muttering about gas prices or city council screw-ups. He was just methodically spreading peanut butter, his jaw tight, his eyes distant. I sipped my coffee, hesitated, then said lightly, "I was thinking, maybe this year we invite James and Vanessa's family for Thanksgiving." "Nothing. Just the scrape of a butter knife. I mean," I continued, forcing brightness into my voice, "it would be nice to get everyone together. With the baby coming soon." I stopped myself. James hadn't officially told me anything yet. He set the knife down carefully, straightened it like a soldier, finally lifted his head to meet my eyes. And in that moment, I knew. I just didn't know what yet. "We need to talk," he said. His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't kind either. It was final, like a man giving bad news he's rehearsed 100 times. "Talk," I repeated stupidly. "After dinner," he said. Then he stood up, grabbed his keys off the hook, and left without even kissing my cheek like he always did. The door clicked closed, and the air left the kitchen with him. The hours after that crawled by like a funeral procession. I tried folding laundry, refolded the same towels 3 times. I rearranged the full centerpiece on the dining table, then undid it and arranged it again. I cleaned the already sparkling stovetop until the lemon scent made my head ache. The clock ticked so loud it felt like a hammer in my skull. I needed air. I needed something. And without really thinking about it, I grabbed my purse, threw on my jacket, and decided to drive to James and Vanessa's farmhouse. Maybe I'd catch James home. Maybe we could talk about Thanksgiving. Maybe I'd get a smile, a hug, a little sliver of normal before whatever nightmare Rob was about to unleash. I stopped at the farmer's market on the way, bought a big jug of apple cider and a box of cinnamon donuts still warm in the bag. A peace offering. A reminder that no matter what else was broken, family was still real. The drive was usually my therapy. Winding pastures, the river flashing in the sun, horses grazing lazily in the fields. But today, I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. When I pulled into their gravel driveway, I almost didn't recognize the place. 4 cars jammed in. Some I didn't recognize. The porch was lit up, laughter and music spilling out into the afternoon air. A party. I hesitated, Maybe I should have called first. Maybe it wasn't a good time. But the cider was already getting cold in my hands. And anyway, I was family. I didn't need an invitation. I climbed the porch steps, balanced the box in one hand, and knocked. The door opened, and there was James, my boy, my firstborn. But the smile that broke across his face when he saw me wasn't joy. It was discomfort. Panic. "Mom," he said, too loud, too forced. "Hi, honey," I said, beaming, holding up the cider and donuts. "I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd drop these off." He shifted his body like he was trying to block the view behind him. Behind his shoulder, I caught a glimpse of a long table set up. Candles, wine glasses, Vanessa's good china. A celebration, one I hadn't been invited to. "This a bad time?" I asked, my voice catching slightly. Before James could answer, a woman appeared at his side. Not Vanessa, Carol, Vanessa's mother. The woman I'd exchanged maybe 30 words with in my life. "Margaret, isn't it?" she said, her smile tight, eyes scanning me like I was a telemarketer on her porch. "Maggie," I corrected automatically, trying to keep the smile on my face. "I didn't realize you were visiting." "We've been here all week," Carol said, patting James's arm possessively, "helping set up for the arrival." I blinked. "Arrival?" I repeated dumbly. James cleared his throat, looking anywhere but at me. Mom, Vanessa's pregnant. We were going to tell you this weekend." Pregnant, all week, everyone else here already knowing. The cider jug slipped a little in my hands. I barely caught it. "That's wonderful," I managed, feeling my throat tighten like a noose. "I'm so happy for you." I meant it. I did. But oh God, how it hurt. "Why didn't you call?" I whispered before I could stop myself. I could have helped." "It's been hectic," James said quickly, his voice too loud, too defensive. Behind him, I saw Vanessa coming down the hallway, her hand resting lightly on her stomach. The china, the candles, the family. Not my family, their family. "Mom," Vanessa said, her smile brittle. "What a surprise." I glanced past them at the table set for their private celebration. "I should go," I said, the words like stones on my tongue. I shoved the donuts and cider into James's arms, my hands shaking. Carol's voice floated after me like a hook. "Why don't you stay, Margaret? There's plenty of food." It was a trap, a polite, poisonous trap, and James's eyes begged me not to step into it. No, I said brightly, the tears already burning behind my lids. "I have dinner plans with Rob. Just thought I'd stop by." Lies to save my own dignity. I turned and walked away before they could say another word. The door shut behind me. I heard the laughter start again, like I had never been there at all. The drive home blurred around me. I barely registered the golden fields, the winding river, the mountains beyond, my favorite drive in the world, now just a smudge outside the window. Every bump in the road jarred the box of empty pain in my chest. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. I couldn't stop hearing it. "Mom, Vanessa's pregnant. We were going to tell you this weekend. It's been hectic." I laughed bitterly, a dry cracking sound. Hectic. Something was wrong. The porch light buzzed faintly overhead as I unlocked the front door. Inside, the house smelled different, still lemony from my earlier cleaning frenzy, but under that, something colder, something ending. The kitchen lights were on. Rob sat at the table, a glass of whiskey in front of him. I blinked. Rob didn't drink whiskey. Not at home. Not at all, really. He looked up at me, and for a moment I thought he might be crying. But no, his eyes were dry as the Sahara, dead. "You're home early," I said, my voice scraping out of my throat. "I came home to talk," he said, almost clinically. "Where were you?" "I went to see James and Vanessa," I answered, setting my purse down with trembling hands. "Did you know Vanessa's pregnant? Her parents have been in town for a week." He didn't react, didn't even blink. Just lifted his glass, sipped carefully, set it down again. "Maggie," he said, almost gently, "I want a divorce." The words shattered the air between us. It was like glass breaking, like time itself cracked down the middle. For a moment, I thought I hadn't heard right. I thought maybe I was dreaming. One of those cruel dreams you wake up from in a sweat. "What?" I said, my voice very small. "I want a divorce," he repeated, slower, like he was reading from a script. "I've been thinking about it for a long time." My knees buckled. I grabbed the back of a kitchen chair, holding on like the earth was tilting. This is a joke," I said, forcing a laugh that died halfway out of my throat. "You're upset. You're tired. We'll talk after dinner, like you said." "There's nothing to talk about," Rob said, finally meeting my eyes. "I'm done, Maggie. I've been done for years. I just didn't have the guts to admit it." Years. Years. I stared at him. The man who used to leave me notes in my car when I had a rough day. The man who bought me orange roses every October because he said they matched my spirit. That man, this man, had been done with me for years. "And you didn't think," I said, my voice trembling with rage, "that maybe you should say something before now?" Rob sighed. "I tried," he said, "but you were always busy." "Busy?" I snapped. "Busy keeping this house clean, busy hosting holidays, busy making sure everyone else had everything they needed." "Exactly," he said almost bitterly. "You made yourself indispensable, but you stopped being my partner." I recoiled like he'd hit me. "Stopped being your—" He stood up then, pushing the chair back with a screech across the floor. "There's more to life than PTA meetings and casseroles and Christmas card lists, Maggie," he said, voice rising. "I want to live before I die." "And you couldn't," I said coldly, "with me?" He hesitated. "No," he said, and that tiny word crushed the last of me. I noticed then the suitcase by the door, his suitcase, packed, ready, his jacket draped over it like a final goodbye. "You're leaving," I whispered. "Tonight," he confirmed, no apology in his voice. "I signed a lease downtown. I'll come back for the rest of my things later this week." I stumbled backward until I hit the counter. I gripped the edge so hard it bit into my palms. "Is there someone else?" I demanded. He shook his head, but it was mechanical. "No," he said. "This isn't about anyone else." It felt like a lie. It smelled like a lie. But I didn't have the strength to fight it, not tonight. There was a long, painful silence. Finally, I found my voice again, sharp and bitter and raw. 35 years, Rob. 35 years, and you're walking out because you're bored." He flinched like I'd slapped him. "I'm not bored," he muttered. "I'm lost. There's a difference." I laughed, but it wasn't a nice sound. It was the sound of a dam breaking. "You know what, Rob? You can stay lost. Stay so damn lost you forget my name. Forget our memories. Forget everything we built." I grabbed the whiskey glass off the table and hurled it against the wall. It exploded into 1,000 glittering shards. Rob just stood there, silent, watching it fall. He didn't even flinch. That was when I knew. It was really over. I didn't cry. Not in front of him. Instead, I squared my shoulders, grabbed my keys, and stalked to the door. "You want out?" I said, turning back to him. "You've got it." I yanked open the door. The cold night air rushed in, full of dying leaves and endings. "And Rob," I added, my voice low and fierce. He looked up. "I hope you find whatever it is you're so desperate for," I said, "and I hope it eats you alive." Then I stepped outside, and I didn't look back. I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour, the steering wheel slick under my hands, my eyes glassy and burning. The world outside blurred into smears of gold streetlights and the endless black of the countryside. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't even know why I was driving. I only knew that if I stayed still, I'd shatter into pieces I'd never be able to pick up. I kept replaying it all in my head, Rob sitting there, cold and firm, telling me he was done, telling me he was lost. No, not lost. He was gone. Packed, signed, sealed, and delivered to his shiny new life without me. And James, my James, laughing and clinking glasses inside that warm house, while I stood on the porch like an outsider begging to be let in. The two men I loved most in the world had both made the same decision in a single day, that there was no room left for me. For a moment, I just sat there, my hands locked around the steering wheel. I could see their silhouettes moving inside. Vanessa bustling around with plates, James opening a bottle of wine, her parents comfortably ensconced on the couch. A whole world happening without me, a life I was no longer part of. Still, some small stubborn hope inside me clung to the idea that my son, my sweet boy, would understand. That he would see the broken pieces of me and open his door. With a trembling hand, I picked up my phone and called him. He answered almost immediately, his voice cheerful and a little distracted. "Hey, Mom, everything okay?" The words lodged in my throat. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. "No," I said finally, my voice cracking. "No, sweetheart. Your father just left me." There was a pause. Too long, before James spoke again, this time quieter, warier. "Left you? What do you mean?" "He packed a suitcase," I said, each word like pulling a fish hook out of my own skin. "He's rented an apartment. He wants a divorce." There was muffled conversation in the background, Vanessa's voice, someone laughing, before he said, Mum, I'm so sorry, I don't even know what to say." I closed my eyes, willing myself not to fall apart. "James, honey, I can't go back there tonight. I can't sit alone in that house. I need somewhere to go. Just for tonight. Just somewhere not empty." Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear the tension thickening over the line. Then a muffled whisper, Vanessa's voice again, followed by James clearing his throat. "Mom, it's not a good time. We've got Vanessa's parents here and the house is full. You know the guest room's packed with nursery stuff. I don't know where you'd even sleep." I stared through the windshield at the glowing windows, at the people inside who weren't too crowded for each other, who had somehow found room for everyone except me. "I can sleep on the couch," I said quietly, shame burning hot against my cheeks. "I don't need anything, just to not be alone tonight." More muffled voices, a longer pause. "Mom," James said finally, his voice gentle but firm, like he was speaking to a wounded animal. "Maybe tomorrow. Tonight's just not great timing." Not great timing. A bubble of rage rose up inside me so fast it shocked me. Not grief, not sadness, rage, boiling and red and volcanic. Timing. Timing. My husband had just detonated my life, and my own son was telling me that grief needed to schedule itself around his dinner party. I drew a ragged breath, fighting the wave of humiliation threatening to drown me. "I see," I said, the words colder than the night air outside. "Mom, please don't be upset. It's just, give my congratulations to Vanessa and her parents," I said, cutting him off. "Seems like they're the family that matters now." He started to protest, but I didn't stay to listen. I hung up and dropped the phone onto the passenger seat like it had burned me. For a few long seconds, I sat there, staring blankly at the farmhouse. Then I started to laugh. A raw, ugly laugh that scraped its way out of my throat and filled the empty car. Not good timing, not enough room, not convenient. They had space for everyone except me. The rage was a living thing now, swirling through my veins hotter than any grief could touch. I turned the key in the ignition and backed out of the driveway so fast the tires spit gravel in a vicious spray. Let them hear it. Let them wonder if they'd just slammed a door so hard it could never be opened again. I didn't know where I was driving. I didn't care. The world could collapse for all I cared. It already had. The highway stretched ahead, black and endless. The tears finally came. Thick, hot, blinding. I swiped them away angrily, but they kept coming, pouring down my cheeks, dripping onto my coat. The betrayal, the rejection, the utter loneliness of it all. It wrapped around me like a shroud. I didn't have a husband anymore. I didn't have a place to sleep. I didn't even have a son I could turn to. How had it come to this? How had 35 years of loyalty, of sacrifice, of putting everyone else first, bought me this? An old woman alone on a dark highway with nothing but a suitcase full of broken dreams. The phone buzzed on the seat beside me. James again. I ignored it. He didn't deserve to hear my voice right now. He didn't deserve the chance to soothe his conscience with hollow apologies and meaningless words. He'd made his choice, and so had I. I wasn't begging anymore. Not for him, not for anyone. I didn't even remember pulling into the parking lot of the Riverside Inn. I barely remembered getting out of the car, grabbing my purse, and walking across the cracked asphalt under flickering streetlights. The lobby doors whispered open, spilling a harsh, sterile light across the sidewalk. I stepped inside, blinking against the unnatural brightness. The woman at the front desk barely looked up as I approached. Early 20s, chewing gum, scrolling on her phone. To her, I was just another weary traveler. Good. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want anything but a place to disappear. "Checking in?" she asked, not unkindly. "Yes. One night," I rasped, my voice sounding foreign even to my own ears. "Maybe longer." She tapped on her computer without a flicker of interest. "ID and card, please." I handed them over with shaking hands. For a moment, I caught my reflection in the plexiglass divider they'd never taken down after the pandemic, and I barely recognized myself. Red-rimmed eyes, mascara tracks staining my cheeks, hair falling limp around my face. A woman in ruins, room 214, second floor. No elevator, just a tired old staircase with threadbare carpet that smelled faintly of mildew and cigarettes. I dragged myself up, each step heavier than the last, the weight of the day pressing down on my shoulders like lead. The keycard beeped, the lock clicked, and I pushed the door open. The room hit me like a punch to the gut. It was exactly what it should have been. Beige walls, floral bedspread, a battered TV bolted to the dresser. But it wasn't home. It wasn't even close. It was nowhere. A liminal space for the lost, the discarded, the left behind. I let the door swing shut behind me with a heavy thud. The silence roared in my ears. I didn't move for a long time. I stood there, frozen, staring at the unfamiliar room. It smelled of bleach and loneliness. The bedspread was rough under my fingertips. The air was too cold, the lights too bright, and suddenly, without warning, my knees buckled. I collapsed onto the bed, the mattress squeaking in protest under the sudden weight. I buried my face in my hands and let the sobs rack through me. Deep, shuddering cries torn from somewhere so raw I didn't even recognize it. It wasn't just about Rob leaving. It wasn't just about James choosing his wife's family over me. It was about every time I had silenced myself, every time I had smiled through disappointment, every time I had made myself smaller so others could feel big, every thankless holiday dinner, every lonely evening waiting for Rob to come home, every ignored phone call when my kids were too busy. It all crashed down on me in that ugly little room. I wasn't just mourning the end of my marriage. I was mourning the decades I had given away without asking for anything in return. When the storm inside me finally quieted to a whimper, I rolled onto my back and stared at the ceiling. A water stain in the corner looked like a lopsided heart. Perfect, I thought bitterly. Even heartbreak was misshapen here. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I didn't want to look, but something made me reach for it. 3 missed calls from Emily, 2 texts from James, and, astonishingly, 1 missed call from Rob. The texts from James were perfunctory. James claimed, "Mum, are you okay? Let me know you're safe." The call from Rob? Who cared? I tossed the phone aside, let them stew, let them wonder. For once, they could sit with the discomfort instead of shoving it onto me. I stood up slowly, my body protesting every movement. I peeled off my coat, then my shoes, then my sweater, leaving a trail of my old life scattered across the carpet. In the mirror above the dresser, I caught sight of myself again, just in my jeans and a plain camisole. Bare, stripped down to nothing but skin and scars. I stepped closer, studying the woman in the mirror. Grey streaks spiderwebbed through my hair. Lines fanned out from my eyes and mouth. There were dark circles under my eyes so deep they looked bruised. But there was something else too. Something fiercer. Something that had survived. I leaned closer, resting my fingertips against the cool glass. "I'm still here," I whispered. The woman in the mirror didn't flinch. She stared back at me, hollow-eyed but unbroken. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. Something small, something stubborn. The woman in the mirror wasn't finished yet. Not by a long shot. I forced myself to move, to act. I rummaged through my purse for the little complimentary toiletries kit the front desk girl had tossed at me like an afterthought. I showered in scalding water, scrubbing the remnants of the day, the betrayal, the grief, the humiliation, from my skin until I was raw and pink. When I finally emerged, wrapped in a scratchy towel, I felt strangely lighter. I didn't have pajamas, so I pulled the hotel's oversized white t-shirt over my head. It hung on me shapelessly, but for now it was armor enough. I climbed into the stiff bed, pulled the coarse sheets up to my chin, and stared at the dark ceiling. My mind raced, refusing the mercy of sleep. Snatches of conversations floated through the darkness. We need to talk. I'm not happy, Maggie. It's just not good timing, Mum. I squeezed my eyes shut, being too much for the very people I had given everything to. They didn't want me broken. They only wanted me whole, silent, useful. And now that I wasn't, I was disposable. Sometime deep into the night, I sat up abruptly, heart pounding. A thought, so clear, so undeniable, blazed through me. If there was no room left for me in their lives, I would make room for myself, not in their homes, not in their schedules, in my own life, starting now, no more begging to belong, no more asking for scraps of affection. I would build something new, even if it terrified me, even if it broke me first. I swung my legs off the bed, feet finding the cold floor. I stared at the shadowy room, ugly, impersonal, uncaring, and for the first time since Rob said those awful words, I felt something other than despair. I felt rage, and resolve. They had closed their doors. Fine, I would kick open my own. And this time, the only person whose approval I needed was the woman in the mirror. Morning came cruelly, without ceremony or sympathy. I woke to the jarring ring of my phone vibrating off the wobbly nightstand. The grey light slipping around the edges of the heavy curtains told me it was still early. Too early for whatever emergency life had decided to hurl at me next. I groped blindly for the phone, blinking blearily at the screen. Emily. My thumb hovered over the answer button. Part of me wanted to send it straight to voicemail, to cling a little longer to the numb cocoon I had managed to wrap myself in overnight. But something in me, the mother part that would never completely die, answered anyway. Mum? Emily's voice crackled through the line, tight and urgent. Where are you? In a hotel, I croaked, my throat rough from too many tears and not enough sleep. Which hotel? She demanded, panic creeping into her tone. Riverside Inn, I said flatly. I'm coming to get you. Before I could protest, the line went dead. I stared at the phone for a long moment, then dropped it back onto the bed. The idea of seeing her, of facing anyone, made my skin itch. I wasn't ready. I didn't know if I ever would be. Half an hour later, a sharp knock rattled the flimsy door. I stayed frozen on the bed, willing myself invisible. Another knock, louder this time. I sighed, dragging myself to my feet. There was no hiding from this. When I cracked the door open, Emily practically barreled inside, her face pale and drawn, eyes wide with alarm. Mom, you scared the hell out of me, she cried, taking in the rumpled bed, the half-empty water bottle on the nightstand, the discarded sweater on the floor. I'm fine, I lied. You're not fine, she snapped, voice trembling. You're living in... She gestured helplessly around the depressing room. This. I crossed my arms over my chest, defensive. It's temporary. Mom, you can't stay here. Come home with me. Please. Emily wasn't here because she trusted me to handle myself. She was here because she needed me to be who I had always been. Steady, contained, predictable. And I wasn't sure I could be that person anymore. I wasn't sure I wanted to be. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the old mattress groaning under the weight of all the words I couldn't find. Emily sat beside me, close but not touching. I get it, she said softly after a long moment. Dad leaving, James acting like an idiot. It's a lot, but you don't have to do this alone. We're still your family. I let out a bitter laugh before I could stop myself. Are you? I said, the words more raw than I intended. Because it sure didn't feel like it when I needed somewhere to sleep. Emily flinched. James feels terrible about that. He told me. Feeling terrible doesn't undo the choice he made, I said, voice low and steady. When it mattered, when I was broken and bleeding, he closed the door. Emily was silent. And you, I added, not out of cruelty, but out of the brutal honesty that had become my only compass. You knew Vanessa was pregnant. You knew her parents were in town. You knew, and you didn't tell me. I was trying to respect their wishes, Emily whispered. And in doing that, I said, voice trembling now, you chose them over me. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't mean to. I know, I said, reaching over to squeeze her hand, but you did. Intentions don't erase actions. The room felt too small, too heavy, with the ghosts of everything left unsaid. Finally, Emily pulled her hand away and stood up. Okay, she said, wiping at her eyes. If you don't want to come home with me, what do you want? The question hung between us, heavy and aching. What did I want? I'd spent so long bending myself to fit into other people's needs that the question felt almost absurd. I began slowly, feeling the words form from somewhere deep inside me, to figure out who I am without being someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's afterthought. Emily nodded, her chin wobbling. Then I'll help you, she said simply. Whatever you need. The sincerity in her voice cracked something open inside me. Maybe I couldn't go back, but maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to do this alone. After Emily left, after she insisted on buying me a bag of groceries and a proper toothbrush and a cheap but clean change of clothes from the department store across the street, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared out the grimy window. Across the parking lot, life went on as if my world hadn't shattered. A mother juggled a screaming toddler and a bag of fast food. A man in a suit shouted into his cell phone as he climbed into a dented Honda. An old couple shuffled hand in hand toward the diner next door. The world didn't care about my pain. And strangely, that was comforting, because it meant I could rebuild without permission, without apology, without anyone's approval but my own. My phone buzzed again. A new text from Rob. Maggie. I'm sorry, can we meet? Just to talk. I stared at it for a long time. Once, that message would have broken me open. Once, I would have rushed to him, desperate to fix what he had smashed. Not anymore. I deleted the text without answering, and it felt like slamming a door, not in anger, but in freedom. I dug through the shopping bag Emily had left, toothbrush, deodorant, a soft grey sweater, black leggings, simple, practical, new. I dressed quickly, pulled my hair into a messy ponytail, slipped on the cheap sneakers, and then, without really planning it, I grabbed my keys, slung my purse over my shoulder, and headed for the door. The sun was shining for the first time in days, sharp and clean against the cracked sidewalks and tired strip malls of Riverside. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't have a plan, but for the first time in a very, very long time, the not knowing felt like possibility. I climbed into my car, the engine coughing to life. I pulled out of the Riverside Inn parking lot. I turned right, away from James's house, away from the empty shell of the home I had shared with Rob, away from everything I had clung to like a life raft, toward whatever came next. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, my heart hammered in my chest, and somewhere, deep down, I smiled. The Riverside Inn's beige walls felt like they were closing in on me by the third morning. I woke up tangled in stiff sheets, staring at the water-stained ceiling, the buzzing fluorescent light fixture flickering like a broken promise overhead. I couldn't do this. Not another day spent marinating in stale air and self-pity. I needed a plan, or at least a starting point. I swung my legs off the bed, shoved my feet into the discount sneakers Emily had brought, and grabbed my phone. There, in the Notes app, where hope had started scratching at the walls of my grief, I had typed 2 words late the night before. Find home. Not the house Rob had abandoned, not the guest room Emily had offered out of obligation. Mine. By noon, after a pitiful breakfast of stale mini-muffins from the lobby, I found myself standing outside a real estate office on Main Street. The window was cluttered with cheerful signs: cozy starter homes, historic charm, pet-friendly rentals. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the door handle. This was ridiculous. I was 60 years old. I shouldn't be apartment hunting like a college kid with a duffel bag and a broken heart. But a spike of anger flared inside me. Hot, sharp, necessary. No, I deserved to carve out a space for myself, not Rob, not James, not anyone else deciding what scraps of their life I was allowed to occupy. I pushed the door open. A little bell above the door announced my arrival, with a cheerful ding, at odds with the absolute war raging in my chest. The woman behind the desk looked up. Mid-40s, sharp brown bob, a look of efficient kindness. "Hi there," she said, standing and smoothing her skirt. "Looking for a place?" I nodded, swallowing hard. "I'm Maggie, Maggie Wilson." "Nice to meet you, Maggie. I'm Karen." She smiled warmly, coming around the desk with a clipboard. "Let's find you something." Karen led me to a battered table stacked with rental listings. As she flipped through them, I found myself blurting out, "I'm getting divorced." She paused, studying me with those bright, too-knowing eyes. "I see," she said gently. "Big changes." "Big," I agreed, voice cracking. Karen gave a small nod, then slid a listing across the table toward me without comment. "Let's find you a fresh start," she said simply. Something about the way she said it, not pitying, not patronizing, just real, made the lump in my throat ease a little. We went through listings for almost an hour, too expensive, too grimy, too much like a place where dreams went to die. And then, the red door. Literally. It was a small studio above a closed-down bookstore on Maple Avenue. Private entrance, sunlight through tall windows, rent cheap enough that I could breathe, barely, and the photo showed a bright red front door, defiant against the faded brick building. I stared at it, heart hammering. "This one," I whispered. Karen smiled. "Good choice." We drove over together in her battered Subaru. The closer we got, the more terrified I became. Every block we passed peeled away another layer of my old life. The woman who baked pies and set Thanksgiving tables with matching centerpieces was disappearing in the rearview mirror. I wasn't sure who was replacing her yet, but I knew she wouldn't settle for anything less than that red door. When we arrived, the building looked rough. The bookstore downstairs had dusty windows and a cracked open sign still swinging from the door, even though the lights were off. A narrow stairwell beside the shop led to the apartment. "Ready?" Karen asked, pulling the keys from her pocket. "No," I said honestly, but I followed her up the stairs anyway. "You'd be the only tenant up here," Karen said quietly, watching me carefully. "The bookstore owner lives 2 towns over, comes by once a week to check inventory." I nodded, barely hearing her. I was picturing it already. A soft chair by the window, a little kitchen table where I could drink my coffee without anyone else's schedule dictating my day. No one else's disappointment bleeding into my mornings. Just me, breathing, being, living. A loud bang snapped me out of my reverie, a door slamming down the hall. Karen tensed beside me, and a man's voice shouted from downstairs, "Stupid lock!" I moved instinctively toward the door, my heart racing, real life intruding on my fragile dream. Karen caught my arm. "Hey," she said firmly, "it's just the bookstore owner fixing the back door. He's harmless." I stared at her, my pulse pounding. This wasn't a Hallmark movie. It wasn't safe little suburbia. It was real, messy life. And if I wanted this, truly wanted it, I had to be brave enough to take it. I straightened my shoulders. "I'll take it," I said. Karen blinked, surprised. "You sure?" "No," I admitted, a half laugh escaping me. "But I think being scared and doing it anyway is kind of the point." Her smile widened. "Smart lady." We went back downstairs to sign the paperwork. My hand shook a little as I filled in the forms, but I forced myself to press the pen down harder, like I could anchor myself to this choice with sheer will. When it was done, Karen slid the keys across the table. "Welcome home," she said softly, and for the first time in a long, long time, I believed it. I stepped outside into the crisp autumn air. The red door gleamed in the afternoon sun, bright and stubborn against the battered building. My building, my life. I gripped the key so tightly it bit into my palm. The fear was still there, churning in my gut. But underneath it, rising like a tide, was something stronger.